Welcome to Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. Here we explore the training and development of America's leaders in the application of air power and the profession of arms. The views expressed are those of the hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.
Welcome back to another episode of Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. I am Colin Slade.
And I'm Reed Gann, and we're your hosts for Commission Ed.
And today we are joined by
Chief Master Sergeant Jermaine Evans. I go by Jay. I am the Holm Center Command Chief, and I really appreciate you guys inviting me on.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you here, Chief. We're not going to call you Jay because you have earned, over your many years of service, the rank and title of Chief.
Absolutely, and I tell you, like I'm a real down to earth guy, but I've come to realize that my nickname has turned into Chief, regardless of where I'm at. I could be downtown eating dinner on the weekend, and someone will come up like, "Hey, Chief," I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?"
Yeah, and just to reemphasize that point, obviously the audience can't see in the video feed, but you, between all three of us, are the only one that's in uniform right now because you're still working the Chief stuff right now.
Absolutely. With, AFROTC Accessions is still the one mission essential piece that's still going. And for us here at the Holm Center, that's OTS. So we actually just had a class come in this week, as a matter of fact. So since the teleworking started and everything is ramped up, and I can tell you down here in Alabama, we literally went from 0 cases maybe about 2.5 weeks ago to over, I think, 600 right now. So things are really ramped up down here, but we still got that mission that we got to go through. For us, OTS is the hot spot right now of making sure we can still get cadets in, we can still assess them, we can get those guys trained up, and then get them up to commissioning, and then we'll see what happens after that. But there's a lot of folks that's teleworking. I'd rather be here to put eyes on.
And we appreciate you doing that for us, making sure that the Air Force continues to be able to meet its congressionally and constitutionally mandated mission.
Yes, absolutely.
So first thing we're going to do here, Chief, we'll turn the time over to you to introduce yourself, tell us about your background, where you're from, how you grew up, what led you to join the Air Force, what your very long and distinguished career in the Air Force has been like, what has got you to where you are now doing what you are doing. I'm sure the audience is very interested to hear how you got to this point.
Absolutely. So for me, and I'll take you guys all the way back to high school. For me, so I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. Probably once you get out to Harbor, not one of the best places to go visit and go see. Don't regret anything I've been through, but it was very difficult time, I guess you could say. So I came into high school. So I was actually a product of JROTC. So it was kind of ironic, I come to be the command chief of all of JROTC. But so what happened? The neighborhood I grew up in was a bad neighborhood. So coming up in middle school, I actually still was the one who was doing homework and doing my work and all that at school, which was different from everybody else. So in my middle school, I was like one of the smartest kids, the smartest, best kids, and teachers just loved me. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm great. Then I went to high school, and I made it to a high school in Baltimore, where it's the top academic high school in Baltimore. But the difference is I was around other smart kids then, right? And I realized I wasn't as smart. So then my motivation just went down. So I got that first report card that had C's, which is the first time in my life I had C's. So I just really stopped trying. The only thing that really I think I went through high school is probably JROTC. And so I did 4 years of JROTC, and I tell cadets now that I don't remember any teacher from back in my high school but Master Sergeant Jackson and Colonel Smith, and those were my JROTC instructors because they kind of kept me motivated. So I bring that part up because I was actually signed up for the late enlistment in 1997, and I didn't come in and graduate until 1998. So my whole plan, like I had literally one plan after high school, and that was to go into the military. And because there was nothing else for me that was there. So I actually, once I got me a part-time job, I think I went to work more than I went to school. That's how bad it was like back then. So a friend of mine who just retired not too long ago, he said, Jay used to come to school just for the test, and then he'll pass them, and then he'll leave, and we don't see him for a couple of days. I was like, they was like, how did you make it this far? I was like, I wasn't always a chief. So I went through all that. So I literally graduated in high school in June of '98, and I was in San Antonio at Lackland on 1 July 1998, and that's when I came in to high school. So really just a couple weeks after graduating. So when I was there, people are getting adjusted, people are yelling at you, this and that. And my whole thing was a lot of folks were saying, you know what, I don't need this, I'm going home, I don't have to deal with this. And me, I was like, well, I have nothing to go back home to, so I have to deal with this. So this is going to be my life for the next 20 years. I'm going to do the best that I can with it. So my aunt, who was actually in the Army, because I wanted to go to the Army, and she told me, no, you're not going into the Army. So you better look at the Air Force. And so I said, okay, I looked at the Air Force. I was in Air Force JROTC, and it turned out to be, for me, the best thing. And so I got to basic training, and I'm sitting there, and they give us your books, and you stand in formation. When you're not doing anything, you need to be reading these books. So I got to the chapter of Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. And I was like, oh, this is the highest position for an enlisted person in the Air Force. You know what? That's going to be my goal. I want to be a chief, right? Because if I'm going to dedicate 20 years to this, then I want to be a chief.
That's awesome.
So that was my goal, like way back then. Had no idea what it took to get there, but I just know at the end of the day I wanted to be a chief. So I went through basic training. I was assigned as an information manager back then at 3 Alpha 0. So again, I wanted to go to the Army. I went to the Air Force. For me, the military was, I'm going to go and get a gun and I'm going to shoot at some things, because for me, that's what that military mindset was. And that's what people in the military do. And then I got an admin job. I'm sitting at the desk. And so I said, okay, we'll see how this thing works. So I got an information manager. I go to Keys Air Force Base, and I'm there for about 3 months because our classes, they're not ready for us yet. So they had other students they had to push through. So I'm there for longer than what I needed to be, but everything was fine. I joined drill team, honor guard, all that good stuff. And I'm meeting new people from all over the United States. And you start to realize, like, this is a melting pot. Like, everyone's coming from all over, and you're meeting everyone. So we get to the part where we have to do assignments. So again, and my whole thing, like, everything happens for a reason, because I'm a product of everything happens for a reason, right? So I'm the only one in my class who does not want to go overseas. I guarantee you, I was the only one in my class that got an overseas assignment. So my first assignment was over to RAF Molesworth in England. And I was very appreciative at this time that I'm going to a country at least that they at least speak English. So I get to England, and I talk about, like, the rough beginnings and this and that. And I know I slacked off in school. I almost didn't graduate high school, but it wasn't that, I just didn't have motivation or this and that. Like, my focus or what I thought was important at the time was working. So at work, I did good. Like, I was one of the younger captains in the area, and I already had leadership positions at the high school. But that was my focus, because I didn't see it long term for school. I seen it more short term for I need to make money and this and that. So when I get to England, when I get there, and now this is my only job. This is the only thing I have to focus on. And so I'm leaving high school. I'm getting to England. In my eyes, I'm never picking up another book in my life because I hated school so much. This and that. I'm going to just go, and I'm going to make me some money, and then I'm going to party when I'm not at work. And that's my whole mindset, right? When I get there, and this, I tell a lot of folks now, like, it is so important, those first supervisors and those first bases, that when you set that first impression up for the airmen that come there, that will set the foundation for their career and their life. And this is what they think, and this is what the military is. So I went to a joint unit, and I had that structure. I had those people around me. And what also helped, I think, is because we're so small of a unit that's up there, that E6 and below were all in the dorms. So it's not like the E3 and below, E4 and below that's in dorms now. It's like all E6 and below is in dorms. So we had everyone around us to kind of motivate us, to kind of mentor us. So that was probably the best assignment I could have went to. So I get there, and at the end of 98, and I'm working, and I got all these great people around me, and I'm in a joint world, so I get to see what the Navy does. I get to see what the Marines do, what the Army does. And then we just get to sit around, and we party together, we talk together, we really look out for each other. And that's that military mindset that, a lot of us get to see, but some of us don't, unfortunately. So I leave there, and I'm there for 2 years, and I get there in '98, and then like I'm the Airman of the Year for 1999. So I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm getting recognized. Like the stuff that I just like doing, I'm like good at it. I'm getting recognized for this stuff. So of course, there's more motivation and all that stuff. So I leave there, and I put on Senior Airman, and I get an assignment to Idaho. Now, mind you, I said I'm from Baltimore. So there was nothing about Idaho that appealed to me whatsoever. So my supervisor at the time said, hey, go on Equal Plus. And me not knowing what Equal Plus is, he's like, that's where all the special duty assignments are. So I go in there, and I'm working in the intel unit. I got a top secret clearance. So I see an intel job, or a job that requires a top secret clearance. I'm still admin guy. And there's a job down in Bowling Air Force Base in D.C. So I apply for that job, I get it. So I'm happy because I don't have to go to Idaho. So I get down to Bowling Air Force Base, and I go to another intel unit, and I'm loving life. I'm close to home, but with traffic, it's far enough away where you're just not too close. You just don't want to take that drive all the time. So I did that, and then that unit, not too long after I got there, went to deactivate. So they start giving us all assignments. We had to go somewhere else. During this assignment, I got married to someone I met when I was at my first base. And then she was stationed at Andrews at the time. So I was like, man, it's going to be hard for this joint spouse thing. So luckily, I was able to get a job up at Fort Meade, working in the intel wing. And I was working in the call squadron at the time. So I was in charge of all the base records for that side of the base, and which was a great job as well. Then after that, we both got assignment. Me and my then spouse got an assignment to Lakenheath. So we went back to England. And so not sure how that piece worked, but very fortunate to get to go to a different base, a different mission. So one of the things about being admin, like I was saying, is the different jobs that you get to work at. So I started off there actually in the CE unit as their admin person and information manager. And I did that for a while, and it's great because I tell you, as you go into different units, and you get to see the cultures of different units, because you might see it as like the Air Force is the Air Force, but when you start getting into different squadrons and different units, you get to see the different cultures of those units. So I started off in the CE unit, and which was a shock for me because I've done all intel and then a call squadron around the intel unit, and also that was some getting used to. And also with my job, a lot of our jobs are one deep, so you might only have one admin person, so you're not supervising people or any of that stuff. So you're just managing yourself pretty much. And then I tell people sometimes your commanders and them might not know what you do until you're not there. And then they realize the stuff that's not getting done that should have been getting done. And that's the life of the admin. And I actually went through this inspection, and USAFE came down and inspected this, and I got through the inspection with no write-ups. So what happens when you do great jobs? They move you somewhere that's jacked up, right? So they moved me from CE, and they moved me over to the ops group.
Yeah, no good work goes unpunished, right, Chief?
Exactly. So I move over to the ops group, and they're getting ready for another inspection a couple months down the road. So I'm getting to learn like ops, and I'm getting to learn flying squadrons, and now I'm working around pilots. So now I'm seeing a different piece of the whole Air Force mission. And then, once again, like, that guy does great work. The command chief wants to hire you. So without any interviews or anything, I'm actually sitting over at the academy, and the command chief comes like, hey, how do you feel about working for me? And before I can even answer, he's like, great, I'll see you when you get back. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to be a command chief exec. Again, my perception was the command chief exec is the person that gets coffee and dry cleaners and stuff like that. And I was like, man, that's just not me. Like, I'm not that guy to be doing that, but I really don't have a choice. And turned out to be probably one of the best jobs that I could have had to open my eyes to a different level of the Air Force. So when you start to see how decisions are made, like usually at a lower level, you're looking at your area of responsibility, and then decisions comes down, and you're like, where did that come from? That makes zero sense whatsoever. So now I'm at that level where those wing level leadership decisions are getting made, and now I'm getting a different perspective. So I loved it. So I did that for about a year, and I made, at this time, I'm already scheduled to put on master. So I'm ready to put on master sergeant, and I'm starting to work around first sergeants and all that stuff because as the command chief exec, the command chief is the functional manager for all the installation first sergeants. So now you get to work with them more and more. And I never had any inclination to be a first sergeant. I really never had any dealings with being a first sergeant. And then as that process went through, it was like, you should think about, putting on a diamond. So we go through that whole process, and just to get me prepared, the command chief says, well, before you go to your own unit, I'll need you to get your experience. So he had me shadowing a couple of chiefs that was, or CMSgt sergeants at the time, that was over in the first, in the med group. And then they actually physically PCA'd me over to the med group. And I'm getting into, the behind closed doors part of the decision-making process. And as a first sergeant, and if you're not a 4A or 4N or the medical FSCs, you don't typically get to see the inner workings of the medical groups. And then I'm in there and I'm seeing it. I'm like, I'm getting a whole different perspective of how this culture compares to like the CE culture or the ops group. And so I'm there and I'm learning, and then I get my class date. So we PCS over to Luke Air Force Base. But in between that PCS, I go to the First Sergeant Academy. And I'm there, and at the time, like, I'm the youngest person to ever go through this version of like the First Sergeant Academy. So I'm 10 years in, I'm about 27, 28 years old, and I'm about to put on a diamond, and I'm going to Luke Air Force Base to have my own unit. I go through the academy, and I go to Luke, and I go in civilian clothes, just trying to figure out, where the layout is and everything. And people think like, oh, this airman is walking through. He must be some new guy that's coming here, so forth. So then I come, and then I come back in uniform. They're like, oh, this is the first sergeant. I was like, yes. So the thing that I realized quickly is that when you put that diamond on, no one cares or knows how long you've had that diamond on. They just know you're a first sergeant. So if you're a diamond for 1 day or you're a diamond for 5 years, they expect you to know certain things. And I'm like, okay, I need to figure this thing out. And I'll tell you, I've made mistakes, but my goal was not to make them twice. And but what I found out is, people just want you to care, right? They just want you, if you take a genuine interest in somebody and their issues and their problems, their families, that's half the problem that you have to, or half of the success that you'll need as being a first sergeant. But again, one of the best jobs that I've ever done in the Air Force is being a first sergeant, because there's no really operational mission for me. Like my number one job is just to take care of people. And for me, that's easy by that time, right? So I don't think I get to the point where I'm at without other folks taking care of me, right? So now it's like, okay, this is easy. I can pay it forward to the folks who's going to come behind me eventually, right? So when I talked about the different cultures of each organization as a shirt, there's still that same culture, that same type of issues that you'll deal with. So you could be a shirt for 5 years in a unit where you're dealing mainly with maybe domestic violence or suicides. Within a whole nother unit, like they're dealing mainly with drugs, and you're picking up the phone calling. You might be calling a 5-year shirt, calling a shirt that's been only had a diamond on for 2 years, but your issues have been so different that you rely on each other so much to be able to pass information and say, hey, let me bounce this off of you, or how did you handle this, and so forth. So luckily for me, because we've had a very great shirt council when we were there, so we was able to do all that stuff and try to make each other better, as well as taking care of airmen. So, I mean, I'm loving this job. And once again, that time came up about 12 plus months in the seats, and they're like, hey, you know what? We need you over at aircraft maintenance. So just to give you some perspective of this, I started off in the med group, and I'm ending my first sergeant tour in a maintenance group, a maintenance squadron. You talk about two totally opposite ends of the spectrum. The med group, like, and no disrespect to the med group, it's not a bad thing, but they're happy. They're, give me a hug. Everything's great. Let's go do some bake sales and this and that, and we take care of, which is great because it's a customer service type unit. I got to aircraft maintenance, and I tell you, like, I was driving back and forth to Miramar, which is a jail picking up folks and dropping people off. I'm dealing with drugs. It's like the whole gamut. And you realize that we'll talk about a little bit more later, the communication piece. I can communicate with this group of folks in a whole different way so they can get and they understand me and we can relate versus, you go to a group like a maintenance unit or maybe a security forces unit where you have to be a lot more direct because they won't understand anything else but directness, right? So you got to navigate kind of through that piece. And I did that, and I tell you, I can grow my beard out, and you can see all the gray hairs that I have, and I got that in those 3 years of being a first sergeant. So I got to the point where I'm loving my job so much, and I know when I originally talked to a command chief, Jeff Williams, who I used to work for, he said you should do 3 years, but make sure you take the diamond off in 3 years. And I got to that point where I got to make that decision on whether I should take that diamond off, and I really want to keep it. So I was down to the last minute, and I give him a call, and I say, look, I know you said I should take it off in 3 years, but I really love being a first sergeant. And he kind of broke it down. His advice was you can do a lot more as an E8 or E9 than you can just run a diamond. And so I took that advice, and later on, at that time, I trusted his word, although I wasn't fully in on what he was telling me. But I took his advice because he's a lot more experienced and he knows what he's doing. So I took the diamond off. After I took the diamond off, I had the assignment to go to Yokota Air Base in Japan. So I'm at Yokota, and that's when I was telling you, I get to Yokota, and that island of that base is, you can communicate very well. If you never took Japanese before and you try to go off base, it is a challenge. So for a while, I didn't leave the base, like no further than going like right outside the gate to get anything. So one day I had the bright idea, you know what, we're going to go to Tokyo. And by this time I had 2 kids as well. I got 2 little boys. So I had a friend come in and they wanted to visit. And I was like, you know what, we're not going to take the train. We're just going to drive. I'm going to get used to driving down there. 6 hours later, as I'm lost trying to get from Tokyo to get back to the base, I realized that maybe this wasn't the best idea. So, but I tell you, after that 6 hours of being lost, I didn't get lost again after that. So then I was able to realize, okay, this GPS system is not going to work when you get through a tunnel. These maps, like I cannot, pull over and ask somebody for directions because I don't know how to speak or hear Japanese that well. And so that was kind of motivation, like, you know what, I'm going to learn Japanese. But now I know my surroundings and, not being afraid or scared to kind of get out and explore those cultures because a lot of people don't get to experience that type of stuff. I was appreciative of my kids who lived in England and lived in D.C. and Arizona and now Japan, that they get to experience that type of stuff because a lot of kids don't get to experience that stuff. So we went through 3 years of that. So I go there and I take my diamond off and I go back to my career field is now a 3D, which is a knowledge operator now. So this whole transition happened when I was outside the career field. So now I go back as a master sergeant and I'm in charge of this section. And I have been out the game for a couple of years now. And also now I'm trying to get back in the game. And not only that, I'm sitting in the comm squadron. I'm over their knowledge ops section, but I have 12 Japanese nationals that work for me as well. And so 12 Japanese nationals and 2 military folks at the time. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around this thing. But there's one thing I know, I'm a checklist person. So I jump into the squadron and getting ready for an inspection. I'll say, so ready for inspection, I got this. Give me the checklist. We're going to make it what we need. We're going to fix everything that we got. We're going to be ready for this inspection. And that's what I do. But I've come to realize that while I was there, the Japanese culture, they base a lot of respect on your age, right? So I'm one of these young guy coming in saying, hey, this is what we need to do. But all my Japanese nationals are at least 15 years older than me, right? So now I'm learning that I have to communicate this in a different way where they don't feel disrespected or anything like that. So it's another thing that you got to kind of overcome. And 3 years within that squadron, although I moved up from the knowledge ops sections to what we call the SEO3, which has knowledge ops and then the NCC, and then I move up to the flight chief level or the ops suit level. And now I'm in charge again of calm areas that I've never dealt with before. They're talking about radar. We're talking about the cyber system guys and this and that. I was like, I have no idea what you guys do. So I'm telling them, like, the master sergeant that's under me, you will give me the answers that I need in the way that I like being honest. And if you don't know it, just say you don't know it. But I cannot. It was hard in a calm world to go back and pick up a book and say, no, that's wrong, what you're telling me, right? Because it's so technical. And so it was really like, you got to build teams, you got to be able to depend on each other, to trust, and all that good stuff. During that time when I was in Yokota, I also deployed to LUD, which was a great and good experience if you have been to LUD. So I get there and I'm working in a maintenance group now. So I'm working in their maintenance group, and this is my first time at the maintenance group level. So I'm working directly for the commander in a deployed environment, and you're literally working 6 days a week. And I've been dying to deploy this whole time, and I finally get my deployment. I'm just so happy, and I get there. I mean, it's besides the heat and maybe the driving off base, everything else was great. If you've been to LUD, if you've driven off base, you know that there's zero traffic rules whatsoever.
Yeah, it's survival of the fittest for sure.
Exactly. Like, if you are like, oh, I'll let this person go, you'll be stuck wherever you're at, like, for hours. And so being from DC or the Baltimore area and being in DC, like, there's a lot of aggressive drivers. So I turned out to be the driver for our group. So me and our deputy commander, every week we would find the new people who came in who haven't been off base, who've just been grinding, and they need that getaway, that relax, and we would get a van and we would take them off base. We would take them down to the mall. We would do all that type of stuff. So we had a very great relationship, great deployment. Loved it. Then I get back to Yokota and I have a little bit of time, and then I'm getting ready to PCS to Alaska. So all I know about Alaska is that it's cold. That is all I know, right? So I'm packing up my house and I'm watching AFN, and there's this show on that's talking about Bloods and Crips in Alaska, in Anchorage, Alaska. And I'm like, isn't it too cold for violence in Alaska? Like, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So I started researching. So one thing I found out is, like, Alaska, it gets extremely cold, but their summers are one of the best summers that you'll find anywhere you go. You're talking about 23 hours of daylight, like nice weather. If you're an outdoor person, like, you probably will never leave Alaska because everyone likes to go out hunting and fishing and this and that. And me, I was not an outdoor person, but I loved it. Me and my kids would go, and they were deep into sports, so we could always go out and find sports. You just have to adjust to, like, the times of the year, because the sports are adjusted based on the weather. So you have to adjust, like, okay, here we be playing baseball right about now, but we can't. We have to wait a couple of months. So what else can we do, type thing. And I'm a big, my whole priority in my life is my kids. So everything, if they're into sports, we're all into sports, and that's what we do. And we're all very competitive, so it gets very competitive in the household. So we get up to Alaska, and this is my first time. And I don't think, besides working base records management, is the only job that I've done twice. So as I leave from Japan up to Alaska, I'm going to Alaskan Command, which is DISCA and Homeland Defense. Never worked this stuff before. Not like I know what it is, but it's like I know it. That's it. But once you get into it and you're learning, like, all the ins and outs of it, which is great about going to different units and different cultures, like, now you get to learn another piece of the Air Force mission. So I get up to Alaska, and again, like, I'm stuck. So I'm like the admin guy. Mind you, I'm an E8 by this time. So I'm an E8, and I'm doing staff work, which was another adjustment. Like, so you get humbled. Like, you don't have to, if you're EA, you're not going to a unit all the time, but you have all these airmen that you're going to be over. You could be the lowest person, like lowest ranking person, which I was. Well, actually, not the lowest ranking person, because I had a couple of enlisted folks that was in the unit as well. But you're working with a whole bunch of, majors, lieutenant colonels, and a whole bunch of civilians, right? So now you have to adjust that, I'm not coming in to run this whole thing. I'm coming in to do my part of the mission. And so my mission was, task management, SharePoint, records, stuff like that I had to kind of get used to. And but as that time grew, we had our unit, which was Alaska Command, which was a joint unit. We had ANR, Alaska NORAD region, which was a binational unit, and then we had 11th Air Force, which was a NAF. So we're all working in one building. So what you realize is, as you're a senior NCO, like it's not the folks that's under you, it's the people that's around you as well. So I had that opportunity of being able to provide that leadership to those folks that was there and to get to know their mission and to kind of help out overall, and then still be able to get to know the Homeland Defense piece and the DSCA piece, which DSCA, the Defense Support of Civil Authorities, and how the military actually interacts with the civilian agencies that, if earthquake happened here, which happened a lot in Alaska, earthquake happened, what do we do? Right. And then it's not, of course, it's not waiting until the earthquake happens. It's like, we got to exercise this thing. So we had several exercises throughout the year, very big exercises. We had state exercises, we had joint exercises. And then you realize how close Russia is to you while you're up in Alaska as well. Right. So all that stuff is you're working, and it's like all brand new to me, but I'm enjoying it because, I'm learning something new. It's tough in the beginning because I think the hardest part of a job is when you first get there and you don't know it. And now you're trying to figure out this job, and that's usually gets to be like the hardest part. Like, I hate not knowing. All right. So once you get past that piece, then, everything's golden and everything's great. And, while I'm up there, in this assignment, I make chief in Alaska. So then I'm still doing that job, but now I'm moving up as the Army would call it like a commandant, but for us it's like a senior enlisted leader for the chief of staff of that command. And so now I'm in that position. I'm waiting. One thing that you'll find out about us admin guys is that we don't grow up, say, like in FSS, where we've done this type of work the whole time, and now we can grow up from the FSS to the MSG to, units like that. For us, we're so spread out that there's no unit that's just full of admin folks that you can move up in. So all of our leadership jobs are typically in a kind of off-like type unit. So for me, I was fortunate enough that I could be in a joint unit and then promote into a leadership position to kind of get more experience and get more perspective. And also, I did that for a while. I worked for Army Colonel Mike Forsyth, and probably one of the best leaders that I've ever worked with before. You look at, you say Army Colonel, and you probably think of a gruffy person who has their coffee and going around yelling at folks in the morning. He was not that guy. Now I'll tell you, he wasn't the guy that you wanted to upset either. But on the day-to-day, he was just he understood leadership, and he understood people, and he understood getting the mission done. And so I learned a lot from him, working under him. But I go into how our admin jobs are very hard for us when it comes to assignment and moving up, because I'm sitting there and I make chief and I still have a year left on this assignment, but I have nowhere to go. And so they keep sending me, the chief group is sending me emails saying, hey, you're surplus, you're over, start looking at jobs. And I could not get a job to save my life. And so it came down to, they said, hey, the only thing we can do is that we can put you in another admin position for the guy who is going to retire the soonest. And that way, when he retires, you can move in. And I didn't like that. I'm not going to share a job with a guy. I want to be doing chief things now. Like, I want a unit. I want to be able to have airmen and this and that. So that's when the Holm Center and ROTC were just bringing the chief positions online. So I said, hey, I would rather extend here in Alaska and apply for one of those positions than go and get double billed with another chief somewhere else, which is what happened. So I got hired as the Northwest Region superintendent. So what's good about that is, for those folks who don't know ROTC, so you have your det level, and then you have your region level, and then you have the headquarters level, and then you have Holm Center. The first chief or first sergeant for the airman that was down at the det level was all the way at the Holm Center. So you're talking about 3 levels that you would have to go through to talk to a chief or to talk to a first sergeant, right? So, and if you look at ROTC, we're talking about 145 different detachments, right? So you have one chief for all of ROTC, all of OTS, all of junior ROTC, which of course created a lot of, there were gaps with professional development. There's gaps with just the overall taking care of those staff sergeants, those tech sergeants that's down in detachments. And so I get this job, and I'm the first chief to sit in one of these positions. Right, so I'm pretty much making the job because there's no continuity, there's nothing. Like I'm going in like what's required. My first sergeant was, I believe the first sergeant that may have gotten that position. They were there a year prior to us, right? So now you got 4 regions with shirts and chiefs that's now sitting in the seat, and it's like, okay, what is it that we need to do, type thing. And I enjoyed that. The hardest part was for me, being a former first sergeant, as I can't get from behind my desk and just go walk and see airmen, right? Because there's one thing to talk to them over the phone or to see them, and I say, hey, how are things going? Things are good, right? But you can look at them and like, things aren't good because I seen you yesterday and I seen you when things are good, and right now things aren't good. So that was the hardest part of that job. But I really enjoyed it, everything that we were able to do, because there's a lot of things that needed to be done. And then I think that for that 1 year that I sat in that position, I was on the road literally for 6 months of that 1 year, right? So there's a lot of frequent flyer miles, a lot of hotel points, all that good stuff, right? But it was all worth, like, it was draining. Like I would need a day when I got back, but once I was out there, like it was great. You know, I would go out for like a week or so, come back, go visit a day or two, come back. And I would go visit the host bases as well. So one of the gaps, I believe, was the relationships between the vets and the host bases. So I would make sure that I would go out to those host bases and say, hey, I know you've heard of ROTC because I've heard of ROTC as well. But let me tell you more about ROTC, right? Because I can tell you when I got the ROTC job, I was like, oh, that's easy. ROTC's been around for forever. You know, it's a well-oiled machine. Everything is good to go. And you get there and you're like, what the heck is going on? Like, you know, in the regular Air Force, we do it this way, right? Or something. So there was a lot of that, but there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes to make this thing run the way it does, right? So enjoyed that time being in ROTC. And while I was in ROTC, so I had the bright idea, hey, instead of going out 1 week at a time, I'm going to just block out like a month, right? And then I'm going to go out and I'm going to visit vets and host bases as much as possible. And then I'm going to come back and then I'll be able to get some work done and try to fix a lot of the issues that we got going on, or at least try to mitigate as much as I can. So while I was on that 1 month road trip, and I think that's when I came down to Det 855 during that time, that year. And then during that trip is when, so I already made the command chief list during that time. So for us in the Air Force, like it's around November, December, that command chief list comes out and you find out if you made the list. So I made the list during that time and they were actually pushing me for a job. I believe it was at Minot that they were pushing me to try to get for a job. So I'm researching that job and you just got to wait to see if you make the interview process. During that trip, I was told like, hey, General Niemeyer, the commander of the Holm Center, wants to do an interview for you for the Holm Center command chief job. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. You know, and I was like, hey, I'm TDY now. He's like, oh, he can only do it this day. I was like, okay. So I get to one of the deaths, I believe it was in Kansas or Nebraska. I think it was in Kansas. And I was like, hey, I know we're supposed to start our visit, but I got to do an interview real quick. Can I go to a conference room? And they hook me over to the conference room, and I do the interview, and he hires me then. And but then I had to wind up cutting that short because I had to go back to start PCSing. And so I cut the last week out short. I go back, I start PCS, and I come back, and then I get to down here in Maxwell to the Holm Center command chief job. So the great thing I love about this job, and I get to brag on this job to other chiefs and other command chiefs as well, because I say, hey, you know, it was great before because I got the mentor and I got to talk to airmen, right? Now I got the opportunity. I get to go to universities and colleges, and I get to talk to cadets, right? And then, you know, when I'm done with that, I get to go to high schools, and I get to talk to those JROTC cadets to say, and hey, by the way, I was sitting in your shoes about 20 years ago, you know, and I wasn't that guy that got all the straight A's, but the light eventually went off, and then this is what I've done since then to make it to where I'm at now, and so that's kind of where I'm at now. I probably took up the whole 90 minutes with that story.
No, that was great. That's a great rundown. I think one of the things that's so great about your career is you've interacted with so many different career fields, officer and enlisted on both sides. So I can't think of a better person to help us and our audience work through the differences, right? Something Colin and I have mentioned on the podcast before, and something I would help try to mentor my prior enlisted cadets when I was an instructor at OTS is there is a difference, and that difference is important. And I wonder if you could kind of speak to that, your perspective on the difference between, between officer and enlisted, and why that difference matters, and what our audience should know as they think about that.
Right. So I think part of the difference, so when you get to the level I'm at now, they really push strategic level thinking towards us. I think they do it with the officers a lot earlier, and there's a reason why. So if you look at the demographics for the Air Force, so we're sitting around 322,000 or something like that, right? Out of those 322,000, there's 66,000 officers, which the rest are enlisted, right? So you got 66,000 officers leading over 200,000 plus enlisted folks and all. So there's a lot more to us than there is of you all, but you guys are in charge. You guys are the leaders by legal authority and everything. And I explained to my senior CEOs and all, like I'm a command chief, and there's a lot that comes with that. But at the end of the day, I'm an advisor. Like as an enlisted person, I'm an advisor because those officers, those commanders, are the ones who's going to make that decision because they have that legal authority to do that. So with the officers, it's more than just you got a degree, you can go and do such like it's more than just degree. It's the authority that the officers have. But on the other side, the enlisted force is not the enlisted force, I guess, that even 20 years ago when I came in. The enlisted force now is so much more educated. It's so much more like the experience levels. These folks are coming in and they've already maybe have done some college, maybe have worked for some Fortune 500 company or something like that. And they're coming in and they're bringing in all this experience, right? So, but sergeant, derives from the verb to serve, right? We are the ones that are serving. We're the workers and this and that, and not just the workers. We have so much more of that experience and that leadership as well. So why I think it's the authorities that separates us. There's no way a unit will be able to function without that teamwork, that gelling of those two coming together and working together to be able to do that mission. When that part is separated, and we think, hey, I'm an officer, so it's my word and it's my way or the highway. And then the enlisted folks are like, well, he's doing his own thing, this and that. That vibe is not going to work. It's never going to work. But when they work together and the experiences and everything from one side can go through and help the person who's going to be that decision maker. And that's basically how I look at it, is that officer is either a commander or a future commander, possibly, or someone that's in charge. And they're going to need that experience and that advice from those senior enlisted people or your junior enlisted people as well, to be able to make decisions that's going to affect a lot. Depending on what your mission is, it could affect a lot. It could affect lives as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I'm wondering is, we go through these training programs, USAF, ROTC or OTS, and we learn about the physical differences manifest on our chest or collars, right? We got these different rank things, and we understand positional authority, but it's more than that. And that, I think you covered it. Yes, it's a division of labor. There's specific roles. They have different positions for a reason. And ultimately, like you said, an officer is responsible for those decisions, but they are not doing their job if they are not listening to every bit of advice, if they're not listening to all the folks that are around them that have that experience. And yeah, that your perspective is really excellent. And you've seen it on the ops side with, pilots and aviators. You've seen it on the intel side. You've seen it on maintenance and med group. And so you've really got a breadth. And so, yeah, I think that's absolutely what we're looking for is what is that difference? I think you covered it really well.
One of the things, like when I go to the detachment or if I speak into an OTS class, And that's one of the questions that they ask me is, what should I do as a brand new lieutenant when I go into my unit? And as a chief, my first advice, because this is what we're charged with as well, is I say, hey, you go find that enlisted person that you're going to be working with, that senior enlisted person within your section, and you tie yourself at the hip. If you go in and say, you know what, I'm an officer, I got my degree, this is how we're going to do things, you're going to fall flat on your face, right? And it's going to be evident to everybody, right? But if you go in and say, if you mesh your authorities and your talents with that senior enlisted person's experience and all the things that he's done and all the things that he or she has seen, you're going to be a well-oiled machine because you're going to work together as a team. And you need that team, that experience from one person and then the authorities of the other to come together and be able to lead airmen and accomplish the mission.
Can I make a bumper sticker of that? Seriously, that's like some of the best advice I've ever seen. I've written it down. If you take your authority and talents, merge it with an enlisted member's experience and knowledge, that's a key for success. Mic drop, Chief. Mic drop.
Yeah, we could definitely leave it right there. We're not going to, but definitely that's some of the best advice that certainly I've ever heard, and really want our audience to internalize that, use that both in their Air Force experiences, but apply that more broadly into what they're doing in high school or college, or maybe they're in the commercial private sector world. Is take the authority that you have, but combine it with someone who's got more experience, and that way you can really make magic happen. And kind of on that note, Chief, I kind of want to ask a same or a similar question to what Reed has asked, but put a slightly different spin on it. We understand from you the difference between the officer and the enlisted roles, but just want to do the thought experiment real quick on what the Air Force might look like, or how things might be different if we didn't have that structure, the enlisted and the officer side. What if we were all just enlisted, or if we were all officer? How might that change the way that we are able to operate for good or for bad?
That's a good one. So the way I look at it, and just looking back at history, you have to have that person who's going to have nothing but to have all the responsibilities and the authorities and all that stuff that they have. For the enlisted side, could some of the senior enlisted folks, the chiefs, be just as effective as officers? Yes. But in the same way I look at it, some of our, I would say our deck commanders, some of them say, hey, you know what? They shouldn't be deck commanders because they don't have this experience. I said, no. They've been groomed up for their positions that the Air Force has asked them to do. So whether they've been in acquisitions or something like that, where the Air Force has said, I need you to do this, and now we put them over in this job. It's not that they're bad people. It's just they haven't had the experience. They wasn't groomed yet because, this is not an FSC for anybody. The enlisted folks, we have our professional development. We're trained to be, if you're going to go and make it the chief, we're grooming you to be a chief. We're grooming you for this. And we're grooming your officers for this because those lines, not that the lines are different, like you're different people, but your authorities, your responsibilities, and all that good stuff are just different. So do I think that we should have just one? No. Do I think that we could probably, if we was to streamline and we all came up as one, and then we kind of split based off what people's desires and skills and abilities to do, I think that would be feasible down the road. Or that would be like if I could change one thing and wave a wand, maybe that might be different, because now I get to see. Before I was super focused, like this is enlisted, this is how enlisted get assessed and trained and so forth and so on. Now I get to see how the office is done, and I can see it's different. Like there's one way enlisted folks come in, and there's three ways that officers come in, right? And so to see how that whole thing works now, I get it, but I can see it differently down the road. But to just have You probably could just have one. I think it's just to be a lot of training and more professional development versus if you groom somebody to be, hey, if you want to come on this side, then yes, you can. But now I have to train you differently or make your mindset differently and so forth and so on. I don't know. I think maybe I'm just old school thinking and all, and I'm so used to seeing it this way. I don't know. Maybe it could work. Maybe it could work if we had just one. I don't know. Let me come back to that one because that was a tough one.
Yeah.
I've never thought
And
of
to
that
be fair,
before.
Colin, you didn't put that on his checklist of questions. So to be fair to the chief, that was kind of out there. But no, I think that's a really good answer, and one that I don't know, Colin, that I've thought about that perspective before is that kind of there's a different role and responsibility that officers can take on, and we need to start that development sooner, perhaps, and have it be a longer cook, if you will. It takes a little bit longer to get somebody there. I don't know. I thought that was good. I thought that was a really good answer to that question you weren't prepped for, Chief. Come on, Colin.
Yeah. So I'll tell you guys. You guys are the first ones I'll tell this. So this is like some late breaking news. So I was sitting here one day and someone asked me. Actually, I was with the Army a couple of months ago, and they talk about how all their folks go through their like kind of like their basic training or whatever. So I'm thinking outside the box. What if every person that came in the military went through basic training and started off as enlisted, right? And then if everyone went through basic training, we start off as enlisted, and then about the E4, E5 rank, or maybe about the 6 to 8 year time frame, we decide, hey, could this person should continue this route, or should maybe we start building our officer force from that group of people? Now you've already had 6 to 8 years of being the person who's actually turning the wrenches, and you can see, that super like that technical level of work and what it takes to be an airman in the military. And now we spun you off, and now you can go and get commissioned if you would like the commission, or if you got the whatever criteria that we come up with and say, you know what, he meets that criteria. We think he'll be good in this position to do this. Now we want to spin you off to be an officer, right? That was just some top level thinking. Like, so now we got to look at, okay, what happens with the rest of the enlisted force? Does that mean that you're not as good and this and that, or whatever the case may be? That might be some problems and issues I thought of. But if we just started off at that point, would that make things better? Well, not that it's bad, but would it like enhance the way things are? So
Preach. I'm buying. Oh my word. Yeah. So Chief, this is something that I have already like whiteboarded for many years. I love that other people are thinking this way. And I think the shared common experience of the training environment that is basic training is a touchstone for our entire enlisted force. All the, like you said, 280 plus thousand folks that most of our officer corps cannot relate to. Our training experiences are different. And I think the thing that really helped me turn the corner on this was when I was at OTS, we had the distinct privilege of having military training instructors, MTIs, as part of our training experience, both as a cadet and then when I went back as an instructor. That experience working with those incredibly talented professionals, I had already felt when I had commissioned that I was missing out on something. And I really respected my prior flight mates at OTS when I was going through. I respected them a lot. I was keenly aware that they had something I did not, and that there was some value there. And then when I went back to OTS as an instructor and I'm working with these MTIs much more closely as staff, I felt it even more acutely. And so I'm already kind of in that place. I've been there for a while. I've already pitched on this podcast. I think every single person who enters the military should go through their services basic training, and then we should pick the officers from amongst that group. And I think we can get over money issues. I think we can pay people if they have things that we want. If you have a degree, you can still get paid more. If all those kinds of things, I think we can get around it. But yeah, I think that singular experience of basic training together, that you can look every airman in the face and say, I know exactly what you've been through and where you got to, and what you've been through to get where you are. I think that would be really valuable. So I love it, Chief. I'm buying. I have zero authority or power in this area, but I'm buying. So yeah, let's do it.
I think it does alleviate a lot of stuff. But again, I go back to, I think, been in this job for a year now, and I get to see how the different officers are assessed. And then the year prior, being in ROTC, but I was at the Air Force Academy, but I was at the ROTC. So to see how the Air Force Academy works, to me, I kind of take a step back and look like, there's three different sources that's completing one product that we all want. And this wasn't my idea, but I kind of heard it and I kind of started running my brain through this, that if we had one command that took care of, from the time that we recruit them to the time that we train them and assess them, and one command is doing all of this, right? So if you got AFRS, the folks in 2nd Air Force, BMT, the Academy, ROTC, OTS, all answered to one commander, and all those resources were there to kind of focus on that, then to me, if I could wave a wand, that would be the future of what Officer Accessions, all Accessions would be.
I'm buying. Again, I don't have any power or authority to make this happen. but please, whoever's listening, let's do this. Let's make it happen. Let's make this work.
We're big fans, Chief.
Well, I appreciate that. I got a couple more fans. It's you two and then my kids. That's about it, probably.
I don't know. I think you've built some rapport and you've established credibility within AETC. I think that it's not so much is there a listening ear. I mean, I'm pretty sure that General Nimoy would listen to you. Pretty sure that General Hecker and General Webb, I think they would at least listen to you. But obviously, Reed and I have never been in that type of position. We don't know exactly what it is that those generals, what type of pressures they are dealing with. But I imagine that there is something coming from the top telling them that this is the way that things have to be, whether that's half A1 saying this is the way it's got to be, the CSAF, maybe it's congressional, maybe there's some actual legal, U.S. code Title 10 type of stuff that's saying it must be this sort of way. So maybe it's not as easy as just snapping your fingers and shifting things around on an org chart. But I imagine that there has to be a way. It's just you got to talk to the right people and get the right processes in order to make something like that happen.
Okay, that would definitely be a heavy lift. I would probably definitely be retired by the time, if anything like that was to happen.
Yeah, tough problem, but I love it. Good stuff. All right, Colin. Sorry, I'm just all a buzz over here. It's got me pretty excited. So, man, good stuff here, Chief. This has been really fantastic. One thing we like to do with a lot of our guests is ask what their leadership philosophy is. If you had to hand out a piece of paper with, your whatever, however you want to boil it down, or however you want to share with our audience, like, what's your leadership philosophy? How do you approach leading airmen?
Yes. So let me start off with this. So when I first got here, and I'm dealing with my folks here, my enlisted folks and CGOs as well. So you take all of that diversity and different ranks and all that good stuff, and then you take into account, like I said, the college cadets, and then you take into account our high school cadets. And what is it that I want to tell them about leadership? So I boiled it down to these few things that I think, at regardless of what level you're at, if you start off like this, you will be you got a lot of the leadership piece down already. So we talk about how that paradigm of leadership, how back in the day leadership was that type A, put your finger in somebody's chest type thing, and that's what they considered. That was the leader, right? And now that whole paradigm has changed to that servant leadership type piece. So now you're looking at that organizational structure and you're flipping it upside down, and the leaders are on the bottom because it's the folks that's at the top that's actually getting the work done, right? So we're in that servant leadership type thing. And so I say, hey, not all of us are what they consider quote unquote born to lead or this and that, but we may be in leadership positions. So how do we navigate through that? So first thing I say is you have to first lead yourself, and that's leading by example, right? Lead by example. You have no idea how you could be affecting someone else because what you're doing, and they may see you and be like, oh, you know what? That's maybe what I should be doing, or that's what I should have did. Just from your actions, like you haven't said a word yet. You don't have to be that charismatic person. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. You just have to do what's right, right? And people will follow you, and you might not know who's following you because they just saw you do something, and they're like, you know what? That's what I want to do, or that's what I want to be, or I should have did that, and you will never have any idea that you've had that effect. Right, but you can control that. You can 100% control leading by example because you're only controlling yourself. Right, so that's the first thing that I tell folks, especially when you're in high school, because a lot of them, they could be quiet. They might not have developed into that full part of themselves where they're comfortable with leading people. And I tell them, first things first, lead yourself, lead by example, and you will never know like the effect that they may have on other people. The second thing that I say is be genuine. So a lot of folks, they see like a great leader and then they turn around and it's like, you know what, I want to be that person, right? And I tell folks like my experiences that got me to where I'm at led me to be able to help other people, right? But that's not your experiences. Your experiences that you're going to go through are going to be able to help develop who you are, and you'll be able to use those experiences to help somebody else down the road. So you have to be genuine. You have to be yourself. There's no problems with enhancing your abilities, but you got to be who you are because one of those important pieces of leading is trust. And if you try to be someone that you're not, and your followers or the people who you're supposed to follow see that, then that trust is broken, right? And they're not going to follow you after that. So you have to be genuine. Third piece is being knowledgeable. So what is your area of responsibility? If you're the intel person and you're an imagery person, and this is what you are, right? So as a leader, a senior enlisted leader or a commander, if I need something for imagery, I know who to go to, right? And it's not my job to know your job. It's your job to be able to provide the right information for me. And when you break that credibility, right, now you're not that go-to person anymore. You're not that person who they can depend on. And the second piece of that, of the being knowledgeable piece, is you have no idea when you speak up in a crowd of people and they know that you know what you're talking about, you're instantly getting folks who are focused on you and ready to follow you because they are confident that you know exactly what you're talking about and you know your job. And that goes a long way. Just the knowledge piece itself will have people who want to know your opinion, who want to follow you, who wants to know, because in that particular area, you're leading by knowing, and education is key. So when I talked before how when I came in the military, I was never picking up another book a day in my life. Like I wanted to toss those high school books over a bridge and not look back, right? This was like graduating high school. My first base I was in, where I was at, I remember coming home a couple of days in a row, and I was like, where's everybody at? And they was like, we're in school. I was like, what? I was like, you know what? I'm going to just go start taking classes to hang out with the rest of y'all, right? And then as I started taking classes, I was like, man, okay, like this stuff is actually helpful, right? Like it's good to be able to go and expand your knowledge and learn about certain things and to have that stuff in your toolbox. And it says a lot. So, and there's nothing more. I didn't think that I would feel the way I felt when I got my first degree. You know, when that accomplishment was over, it felt just like that. Like I felt accomplished, like I've done something, and it felt good. So I went from not wanting to get take another class ever to 2 associates and a bachelor's and some certifications. But it's not like it's work. It's like, oh, like just something that helps benefit me. And it adds to my credibility that I have this education or this background behind me and I got this piece of paper hanging on the wall that maybe, like, I know I could talk on this particular subject, or I could do this, because that adds credibility, and that it increases the level of the amount of people that want to follow you, because they know, you know what, he's not just talking to be talking. He actually like has experience in this, or he knows this, or he's worked with this, and that goes a long way for folks.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Chief. Those are super solid, and I'm certain that I've seen, different ways of putting that all together. I know I've given some of that to my students when I was an instructor. Colin, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I just want to summarize for the audience the Chief's main points here. Lead yourself, lead by example, starting by leading yourself, even if you're not in a leadership position. Be genuine to yourself, and then be knowledgeable. Continue that education, continue that development, so that you can establish credibility and be ready to serve when called upon.
Actually, if I could add one more, and this is not what I usually tell, especially like the high school cadets or so forth, but I think it is crucial, and I definitely make sure I tell my NCOs and my senior NCOs, SCGOs as well, that I think is also very important. And if you guys ever read the 5 Levels of Leadership, which is a great book, but a part of that, when you're starting to decrease your level, is producing other leaders. So I think that goes a long way. I'm not just out here telling folks, hey, do this because I did it. I'm telling you to do it because one day you'll replace me. And I can't go out and lead 1,000 folks right now. But if I got senior NCOs that all have 100 apiece, I can lead those and develop those folks to be able to take my place, which in turn, I'm hoping that they're doing that with the folks that's under them. And it starts that ripple effect. Right. And one day, like, I'm going to hang this uniform up, and hopefully that person who I've hopefully had influence on in the past is going to take my spot, and they're going to use those same tactics to be able to not only lead themselves and lead others, but take it that next step and then develop other leaders and develop leaders who are also developing other leaders.
I love it. It reminds me of the analogy, the metaphor of the apple tree. The apple tree doesn't exist to produce apples, but the apple tree exists to produce other apple trees. Same thing goes for leaders, whether enlisted or officer. Same deal applies, that we don't exist strictly to accomplish the mission and to lead other people, but we exist as leaders to produce other leaders. I love it, Chief. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you sharing your leadership philosophy and some of the advice that can be applied to any prospective officer or officers that are already in the Air Force, are enlisted airmen. They can latch onto that advice as well. Being the command chief for the Holm Center, knowing that there are many officer instructors within our organization, what sort of advice would you provide to the officer instructors themselves, those who are engaged in the work of producing other leaders?
I tip my hat off to the instructors that we have. And before I answer that, so one of the things Joe Niemeyer was very a super big advocate of since he's been in the seat is making sure we have the right officers that's doing this. And there's been that perception that, we don't have, either we don't get the right selection of folks, or the career fields want to keep those good folks with them instead of being able to let these guys go and be able to teach others. And I think that's very important, and he feels those very important as well, that we have the best training our next generation to make them the best. So the advice that I would have for those instructors, number one, first I would say thank you for the sacrifice that you guys make. Like, you guys, that you come in and you're instructing those folks, but it's very crucial because they're going to leave you and come into active duty, and they're going to take the advice that you gave them, and they're going to initially use it, and then they're going to tailor it on what they would see or what they are experiencing, whatever unit that they're in. So for those instructors, I say, hey, number one, don't sugarcoat anything. Like, the Air Force isn't perfect, but it's great, and it's a lot better than a lot of things. Like, I wouldn't trade this career in for anything, or what we do for anything, but you don't have to sugarcoat it to make it seem like, hey, every day is going to be great, because it's not. But we have to prepare those and prepare those guys for that, and preparing them to be resilient. And that's a big thing that we're doing now, is we're teaching and we're like hammering home, like, you have to be resilient. And how do you cope when you're going through those bad times? How do you cope when you come in and you find out you're not strated as the top officer? How do you cope when you come in and, your airman or someone that you're leading is not giving you that respect, or not listening, or doing their own thing, that you just can't get them in line? Those type of things is, besides just the academics that they're teaching them, but what are those real world and those experiences that you have that you can pass to them? And then what can you learn from them as well? Like I said, we got folks that's coming in that with backgrounds that is way different than it was like 20 years ago. And they're bringing in a lot of experiences as well. And so how are you capitalizing on what it is that they have as well? And a lot of at least the enlisted PNB side, we're going into that format of not just, teaching you the academic part of it, but it's more of an open circle, and everyone being able to kind of listen to other folks' experiences and get different mindsets, and also ensuring that folks are doing that, and then just know, like, you have to realize that you're not just coming to work just to teach a book. You're teaching these folks how to be leaders in the best Air Force in the whole world. So what is it? What else besides that book are you giving those folks to prepare them for that? I think sometimes we get blinded and think that these airmen won't benefit from the knowledge or the experiences that we have. Like, that is not as important as you would think. But when you start talking to some guys, you realize, like, oh, they have no idea about this, or they have no idea about that. Let me kind of break it down and being able to share that experience. At least give it to them. Like, they don't have to take it and use it right now, but they have it in that toolbox. Like, you know what? I remember that one time when my instructor told me this, and this applies to this situation, type thing. So I take my hats off to those folks, because especially, you talk about OTS and how many flights that they're pushing, and they're getting all those folks in and out, and they got those instructors and they got their TI, and that's helping groom them in that short amount of time. And you got the ROTC, you guys have them, and I gotta say it's not easier, but you have it for 4 years, right? So I think a lot of feedback that I got is, you see that cadet that come in on their freshman year, and you're like, he ain't gonna make it. There's no way he's gonna make it, right? But then you see that maturation over those next couple of years, and you look at, that person's about to put on lieutenant bars, right? And that is not the same freshman that we've seen 4 years ago. That you look at now, and everything that you guys have done to teach them and to mold them and to make them better leaders and all, I mean, that's a result of that, right? And now they're taking that and they're putting those bars on, and now they're going into operational Air Force, right? And so I take my hat off to you guys, but I would just say, it's more than the books. It's a lot more that the instructors are giving these guys that's preparing. And I keep saying guys and girls, that's preparing them for coming into the operation Air Force.
Awesome. Such great advice, Chief, on so many levels. We really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today and share your knowledge and experience with us. I think Reed and I are just basking in your wisdom here. We've learned over our time in the Air Force, and give this recommendation to everyone in our audience: when a chief speaks, just shut up and listen.
No, I promise you, this is the experience, and this is what I love doing. I didn't come in thinking like, hey, you know what, I'm going to be an influence on a lot of people. This is just, you find your reason, you find your why. As the book Start With Why will say, you find your why, and this is what I love to do. Like, I don't think I have a specialty. My specialty is people, and being able to help people and show them my experiences and so forth, which is why, like, I love being here at the Holm Center. I get to, there's not many other units that can say, hey, I got over 1,000 locations across the world of nothing but folks who our job is either to develop and make them officers, or at the JROTC level, develop them just to make them great citizens. right? So, and a lot of folks don't get that. A lot of folks don't understand, we have JROTC cadets who may not have families at home, who may be homeless, who maybe have no one to depend on it and get advice from, but all they have is that JROTC core and those cadets that's around them. And being able to see that, and a lot of those folks medically or for other reasons will never come into the Air Force, right? Because they just don't fit the standards that you will need in the Air Force. But that doesn't take away our desire to want to build those folks to be great people and great citizens. And then when we get to the OTS and JROTC level, we're doing nothing but producing, and we're sending our product around the Air Force. Those lieutenants that's coming in, we're sending that all around the Air Force. So 85% of the officers come through the Holm Center or commissioned through the Holm Center, and then that other piece is the Air Force Academy. But our product is getting sent all around the Air Force to do our mission, right? And that's something that we got to take seriously. And being able to be a part of that, and then being able to influence those that I can influence to make that happen, is probably the most rewarding job that I've had.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chief, for taking the time to share that with us. I've got 2 more questions for you. First one is, if someone wants to reach out to you, get in touch with you, ask some questions about what it's like being a command chief, maybe they've got some ideas for JROTC, ROTC, OTS, or anything like that, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So like I said, I just figured out somewhat of the social media thing, right? So on Facebook, if you search Holm Center Command Chief, you'll find my page there, and you can send me a message. On Instagram, there's Holm Center CCC. You can find me on there as well, and you'll see some of the pictures that I'm able to get out when I'm out with people or with the airmen and NCOs is on there as well. And then my Gmail is evansjer80@gmail.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief. And we'll make sure to link that contact information in the show notes so people can find it there. Last question for you, Chief. What does it mean to be an officer?
I believe that, to be an officer, and I don't think this advice would be different from being enlisted. I think that to be an officer, your job, your mission, regardless of what it is important. And if you don't look at just your bird's eye view of, I'm in charge of this CE flight right now, but what does that CE flight do? And what does that CE squadron do? You have to understand that. So the responsibility that you have, not just as an officer, but as an enlisted person, your job reaches a lot further than what you think it reaches. And that's a lot that's on someone's shoulders. So to be, I would say an airman, instead of just an officer, but just to be an airman, your job, I think, is 1% of the nation is able to even put this uniform on. And to be the officer, that 66,000 versus the 280 or so enlisted, or vice versa, just being part of that 322 is so important, and is so much bigger than us. And when you realize that, this isn't about just me or just this flight or this squadron, this is about the base and the Air Force and the Department of Defense and the NDS and all that's the stuff that guides us and kind of gives us our priorities. That's what this thing is about. And then that's what our responsibilities are as airmen, officer or enlisted, to be able to make sure that mission gets accomplished.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief. All right. We'll go ahead and leave it there. A huge thanks to you, Chief, for taking time out of your schedule to share your thoughts and experiences with us. I've certainly learned a great deal from our discussion that will help me and the rest of our audience to be better officers. Again, thank you, and we look forward to seeing your career progress, especially as you continue leading the effort to produce quality officers for our Air Force. Thanks, Chief.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Commission Ed.
Thank you for listening to Commission Ed, the Air Force Officer Podcast. The views and opinions of the authors expressed herein do not state or reflect those of the government and shall not be used for advertising or product endorsement purposes. Mention of any specific commercial products, process, or service by trade name, trademark, manufacturer, or otherwise does not necessarily constitute nor imply its endorsement, recommendation, or favoring by the U.S. government. The mention of companies by name is solely for the purpose of discussion and should not be implied as endorsement.